Hello, sports fans. I'm Charlie. He's Jake, and welcome to Charlie and Jake's Hot Takes. We've got a great episode for you today. We're talking some quarterbacks in the draft as we've been continuing that series. We're looking at some over-unders. We're going to talk some NBA, so a great episode coming up. And Jake, we're going to start off. We've got probably, in my opinion, the most interesting guy in this year's draft, Jordan Love. Do we love him? No pun intended. Jake, tell me what you think about Jordan Love.
Well, he's a very complex character, as you said, because people don't really know what to think about him. He didn't play in the SEC. He didn't play in a big conference. He played out in Nevada. But I like him. I think he shows a lot of signs of Patrick Mahomes, and we've seen how successful Mahomes can be. So we talked last week, you have to evaluate guys based on their comparisons, and he's got a pretty good comparison in Mahomes if he can live up to that.
Well, the interesting thing for me when you talk about comparisons is I've seen the Patrick Mahomes comparison. I've seen Colin Kaepernick comparisons. I've seen Blake Bortles comparisons. It seems like there's a lot of people who are mixed on Jordan Love. Obviously, it seems like he's been rising a lot, especially with the questions regarding Tua. People don't seem to be sold on Herbert. So he's been kind of like the default as like the next guy up. And you've seen him I think at the beginning of this process, he was more viewed as like a second round or maybe late first. Now it's seeming more and more likely that he'll creep it into the mid first, maybe even early, if a team is really sold on him. So one of the knocks on him is he played at Utah State, the Mountain West Conference. Just for a little context, Josh Allen came out of the same conference as Wyoming. So in 2018, he was all Mountain West performer. He had a great season. They were 11-2. He had 3,567 yards, 32 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 64% completion percentage. You watch the tape; he looked awesome. They had Matt Wells, who ended up taking over at Texas Tech for Cliff Kingsbury. And then what happened after was they had a coaching change. They brought in Gary Anderson, who was previously of Oregon State. And 2019 was the team struggled, and Love really struggled as well. He still threw for gaudy numbers. He put up a lot of yards, but he had 20 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. Obviously, going down significantly by touchdowns and rising by interceptions is a concerning case. It's interesting to me that if you remember, it's happened a lot, though. I remember Josh Allen. He had a great junior season. His senior season was not as good. Sam Darnold's another guy. He had a much worse senior season than his junior year.
Well,
I think uncommon, but I'd like to hear what you think about the drop-off in production.
Well, I just want to say one thing before we talk about the drop-off in production. Coming into this season, he was the number 2 quarterback in the draft behind Tua. People really loved him from what they saw last year. And I think last year he had a far superior team talk 2018. Yeah. He had some really good guys around him. They went 11-2. They had a lot of success. And then this year he kind of had to step up and play with less superior guys, 20 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. So I know the interceptions is a little bit alarming, but he was kind of trying to do everything. He was trying to be the hero. They were winning and losing games based on him. So I think he was being aggressive. And obviously you don't want a ratio like that. That's very alarming, but I think he could do it. He's got the arm strength. He's obviously a very raw prospect. I don't know if he's ready to come in and start tomorrow, but I think he could really get the job done in the future for a team. Maybe give him a year like Mahomes had or 2.
Yeah, and I think if you watch the tape, I think watching his performance between the 2 years, like you said, the difference in talent is really there. The offensive line in 2019 wasn't terrible, but he was feeling a lot of pressure. He was only sacked, I think, 20-something times. But that's more of a product of him like getting away. He's a really good scrambler. He's 6'4", 224, but he runs a 4.74, and he can get out of the pocket. Even like one of the things that's been brought up as a con for him is that he leaves the pocket too frequently. So it's interesting to me that a big guy like that, he's still a good scrambler and is good at moving the pocket, and he really needed to last year. So I don't know how much you can blame him for that. But this year, 5 games with 2+ interceptions. He had some clunkers. I mean, they played LSU, which we've talked about a lot because it seems like LSU's defense played against a lot of these quarterbacks who are going to be drafted in just a couple of nights. And he struggled, but I can't look at that performance and blame him. When you have the Utah State receivers against guys like Deplet and that secondary, which was probably the best in the country, I don't think anybody was going to succeed. So I'm not really going to hold too much against that. An interesting game for me that he played was against Wake Forest, which is not a great team, but they were a solid
They
team.
were good. They were good.
They had a team. They had a really good team, and obviously they're not upper echelon, but they're definitely a very solid Division I program. And like you said, he was playing hero ball. He was they ended up losing, I think, by 38-35. He was 33 for 48. He had 3 touchdowns, but he also threw 3 interceptions. But again, I don't know how much of that is a product of him being the only other. He's an ACC caliber player. His team is not that caliber, and he's playing against an ACC team.
Yeah.
So he's probably forcing some throws, and that's what the tape will show you.
I think we really just need to break down that season he had 2 years ago when he had legitimate guys around him. 32 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. That's really impressive numbers. So we've seen that he can be an elite quarterback. So I think we shouldn't really focus too much into the struggles he had this season with the Mountain West team when he could be playing. He's 32-6 guy, I think.
Yeah. There are issues though. I mean, well, first we can talk about what he has. What he has is an absolute gun. He can throw the ball. He can be on the move and throw a ball 50 yards down the field. He will stretch defenses. Some of his long throws aren't that accurate, but again, I don't know how much of a product that is of just where he's playing and the fact that he might have to put it in a place where his receiver can be the only one who gets it, because you're not really going to have receivers who are going to be able to grab 50-50 balls. But his arm's great. He can really put touch under the ball. He can really loft throws in there. But one thing that I noticed was he needs to learn to read defenses a lot better.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing for him, and I think that's going to really define him as a player and as a prospect. There were some throws and this is where you say it's Mountain West. The rest of his team wasn't that great. But then you see him getting tricked by Mountain West defenses, and you wonder if he's getting tricked by those schemes, what's going to happen at the NFL level?
Well, I think it's important, though, to think, as opposed to him versus a guy like Tua or Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow had Joe Brady with him, a magnificent coach who really made him great. Jordan Love hasn't had the great coaches yet that he's been exposed to, that he will be at the next level. The Mountain West doesn't have the same brilliant minds in the SEC. So maybe you get him a real coach, really can break down film with him, and then who knows what he could be. I think film and knowledge of the game is something that you could get at the next level, something that he will develop.
I definitely agree that he can be that guy, but I'm still tentative on him because there are obvious things that he does that are issues for young quarterbacks and quarterbacks overall. If you can't look off the safeties, which he's had trouble with, he locks into his receivers. That's going to cause him problems at the next level. That's a hard thing to do. He has trouble with weird snaps, They're just like little things that hopefully they're nothing, but they definitely would be red flags if I'm in the war room come Thursday.
So where do we see him going on Thursday or maybe Friday?
I think he's definitely a Thursday pick, and I could see him going, honestly, anywhere from 13-ish, maybe a little higher. I could see him going if all three quarterbacks – if Burrow, Herbert, and Tua are gone, and I think it's Jacksonville as the 9th or 10th, right? Maybe he goes there. So I could see him going all the way up to 10. I could see him going all the way down to like 30 at the Packers. So it's really
so I think that the top 3 guys are going to go in the 6 picks to Miami, San Diego, and Cincinnati. I think those guys are going to be gone. So starting at 7, he's going to be the top quarterback on the board. I think Green Bay is a really interesting fit. I also think New England maybe. They're going to be in the market for a quarterback.
Awesome.
I think Belichick could really get him where he needs to be because he could really polish his skills and have a strong armed guy like that could be really interesting.
Yeah, that would be a big fit. I think it would just be I think Belichick would be a great guy to give him tutelage, just that Patriots staff overall. They don't really produce obviously quarterbacks who've gone in there. Jacoby Brissett, Jimmy Garoppolo are both Garoppolo's a Super Bowl losing quarterback. Brissett's a serviceable starter. So both of those guys came out of the New England camp, 3 quarterbacks on one team, and all 3 of them becoming good NFL starters is a rarity. Yeah. So obviously they know what they're doing at New England. But I think if that's where it's going to be interesting to me come draft night is that, like you said, we think the first 3 are going to go in those 6 picks. So then everybody from 7 to 32, depending on how long he lasts, you think you have a quarterback, who's the best guy available at the most important position, a team might just say, I need to reach and get this because when's this opportunity going to come again?
Yeah,
Very
exactly.
similar. I was reading an article on ESPN about the Jets in 2000 when they had I think 3 or 4 first-round picks. And I think they took Chad Pennington, even though they kind of thought they had a quarterback still, because he was just there and he was the best available quarterback and he had dropped a little bit. When you have quarterbacks, it's it's the most important position in the game, and they're so hard to get good ones. If you think a guy's good, even if he doesn't fit your immediate timeline, you sometimes have to grab at him.
I think the most realistic spot, though, where I really think we're going to see him, I think we're going to see him with the Raiders. I think the Raiders are trying to get a lot of guys in there, have a competition. I don't know how set they are on Derek Carr. I think they really want to get it. They have a good roster around them. They want to find the right quarterback. So I think Mariota, Carr, and then Love could be a really interesting quarterback competition.
Yeah, that would be a really talented, very interesting camp. Mm-hmm. So obviously Jordan Love, it's going to be really interesting to see where he goes. I think we both agree that he has the tools to be a great quarterback. Certainly some question marks there, but it's going to be I think he's going to end up, if he gets in the right situation, I think the league is going to be put on notice because this guy can play. So now the Odell Beckham Jr. trade rumors. I mean, in the lull of sports news, I think that more rumors have come up than usual within this quarantine. Everybody's looking for news, and so rumors came out on, I think it was a couple of days ago, that Odell could be traded to the Vikings for a second and a fifth. That was, I think, Jay Glazer who said that. I could be off on that. And then later, the next day, or during that day, the Browns CSO, Paul DePodesta, said, I will just say it's completely false. And he went on to say, this was of the Odell trade rumors, and he also went on to say that it's pretty frustrating that everybody thinks that he's going to be traded, and is always trying to manufacture trade rumors. But it's hard to believe those things. I think we can both agree, because you remember Dave Gettleman said the same thing. He said, we didn't sign him to trade him. Well, they traded him.
Well, I think anything that I never really believe anything that comes out of an organization about a guy. They're not going to say we're shopping Odell, and then if they end up keeping him, it's just causes a risk. So I think that it's just not the right fit. I think it looks very good on paper, but I think the Browns are still a team that's building. And even if they are a team that's in a playoff contender, they're still a building team, a young quarterback, and that's not where Odell wants to be. Odell cares about his numbers. He cares about his appearances. I think he wants to be in a big city. I just don't think Cleveland's the right fit. And if they get the right offer, I think he's out of there.
Yeah, and Mike Freeman of Bleacher Report, he said, several teams believe that it's only a matter of time before Beckham gets traded and that he's not a fit with the team. And his stats kind of revealed that he had 74 catches, just a bit above 1,000 yards, only 4 touchdowns. Compare that to 2 years ago, 2018. He was playing with Eli Manning, who was in the twilight of his career, not really playing effective ball. And it was also a year that he only played 12 games, and he had better stats than that in every category. So I don't know. I think Odell can do so many things. He's a great receiver still. I still would want him on my team. I don't think the attitude problem is as pronounced as people say it is.
It's funny you say that, because I actually think the attitude problem is a big issue. And I'm not someone who thinks that attitudes are so important. If you can ball, you can ball. I even really said that with Antonio Brown. But he's been a guy where he had the problems in New York, and then he has a problem in Cleveland. So he really has been a guy who I don't think is good in the locker room. He seems to be very conceited, and he hasn't led to winning games. I don't even think he's played in the playoffs yet. So this Browns team was so hopeful, and then they kind of disappointed, and I just don't think he's a leader, and he needs to be a leader. So I don't really know if I want him in my locker room.
Well, in that Mike Freeman report, he did say that it's not that that it's a matter of fit. The other NFL executives believe if Odell's traded, it's for fit, that he doesn't fit in the offense, not because of his attitude problem. Mm-hmm. And I think it's easy to say Odell's he's a little bit eccentric. He has an attitude problem. But every single wide receiver in the league has an attitude problem, if that's what you want to call it. It's just the way that the wide receiver position is now. They're characters, and they're guys who like to celebrate. They're guys who put up huge numbers. And I don't think there's a top wide receiver in the league who you can really say has never been accused of having an attitude problem or being bad in the locker room.
Julio Jones, Michael Thomas, Yeah,
But even Michael Thomas has gotten himself in a little bit of beef throughout his career. It's kind of just a given with the wide receiver position. And I really don't think that Odell is as big of a problem that way. I don't want to get rid of him because of his attitude. I don't think that – and you're saying how the Browns went – they had a miserable year last year, which nobody will debate it was an awful year. But the reason the Browns had an awful year was, one, because Baker Mayfield fell off a cliff. And the reason Baker Mayfield fell off a cliff was not because his weapons were upgraded. It was because they promoted Freddie Kitchens, who is a QB coach. You can't move up that fast. And that decision is one that it might stunt Baker Mayfield's growth. It might stunt this team's growth because you can't have a guy who was a quarterback's coach one year go into being a successful head coach the next year.
Well, I think they kind of it's a very clearly a poorly run organization. And I think that was Baker's guy. Baker liked him. They wanted to make Baker happy because they thought he was like the next big thing. But I think clearly this season showed that Baker has a lot of work to do and that they should have maybe made a bet. They clearly definitely should have hired a better guy, and hopefully their new coach is the answer from Minnesota.
Yeah, Kevin Stefanski. And that's the interesting point is that if you watched Minnesota last year on offense, there were games where Kirk Cousins was throwing 10, 15 throws a game. He really wasn't throwing the ball that much.
That's
this team's going to be more run like a running team. They're going to pound the ball a lot. They're going to run a fullback, and they're going to try and pound it with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I mean, those are that's probably, in my opinion, the best two-headed backfield in the
Absolutely.
league. Why wouldn't you use them? So then it comes into question, is it worth it to have Jarvis and Odell? I think you can pick one and go that way. It was interesting because it was really interesting to me what Dan Orlovsky was saying. They were on Get Up on ESPN. There was a little round table, and he was talking about how if you look at Odell the last two seasons and you take away the name, you just say there's a receiver who's been 21st in reception yards in the last two seasons, 16th in receptions, and tied for 34th in touchdowns. So this is a guy who's a good, not great receiver right now. In 2017, he was injured. 2014 to 2016 has really been his prime. It's crazy that the first 3 years of his career were the best, and it seems like
people were praising him like crazy, calling him the next Jerry Rice, calling him the greatest thing in those years, and then he's kind of had a decline.
But I don't know I believe that he can get back to that level. I'll say it right now. I think Odell Beckham Jr. can get back to the level that he was at pre-injury because he's been playing. What's he been playing with? He played on a 4-12, 5-11 Giants team. He played on a Cleveland team that was so poorly run. He still didn't have a bad year. Given the situation, he played fine. He still had some highlight plays. You still had to guard him. And moreover, if you're putting Baker Mayfield in a position where you're taking away weapons, so like you said, his guy is Freddie Kitchens. They get rid of Freddie Kitchens. Nobody's going to dispute that move. Freddie Kitchens was not the guy to lead a Cleveland team. But maybe we don't know Baker's feelings on that. Baker Mayfield still might have been with Freddie. Then you put in a coach who's designed to run the ball more. Baker Mayfield isn't blind. He knows that that's happening. And then you take away his best target. What says that that's not going to lead to Baker completely losing confidence? It seems like if you trade Odell, you hire a run-first oriented coach. It seems if I'm Baker Mayfield, I'm thinking, do they want to move on from me? What's going on here?
I think he's a confident guy, and I think the management has shown that he's their guy for the future, and I think he can lead them to the playoffs. But he's not blind. He knows they have the best 1-2 running punch in the league, and he knows he's the leader, but they want to win games, and he's their guy for the future.
He is their guy. But for a guy who's coming off that rough season, they're still going to have to throw the ball, and I think they still will throw the ball a decent amount because I believe that Baker's a good talent.
It's a passing league.
It's a passing league, exactly. You're going to have to throw the ball every now and then. And who do they have at receiver? Jarvis Landry is a slot guy. I don't buy him being the number one right now. I don't know. To me, he's a 1A. You know what I mean? I'd like to have a guy better than him in the receiving corps. And I just don't there really aren't. They don't. Maybe they draft somebody. They could draft this such a deep wide receiver draft. Maybe if they draft somebody, it would make me feel better.
Well, they signed Austin Hooper in free agency. I believe they still have David Njoku, who showed signs of being really good. So that's a good 1-2 punch at tight end.
And Kareem Hunt can definitely catch out of the back.
Kareem Hunt could catch. Rashad Higgins, I believe, if he's still there, is a really talented wide receiver who showed signs of being good at the end of last year. So who really knows what they can do? They're very deep. And I think Odell's going to be there in September. I don't think he should be. I don't think they need him, but I just don't think they're going to get the right offer. And they're going to get one more shot to run it with all those weapons and see how it goes. And then if it doesn't work again next year, they'll have to move on.
See, that's why I'll advocate for Odell Beckham Jr. being there. Brandon Cooks coming off of a season where he was injured. He had his fourth concussion in like a pretty small time span. Got the Rams a second-round pick. So you can run it one more year with Odell, and you could still probably get a decent return. I don't think Odell's going to suddenly become a bad receiver. I would certainly value him over somebody like Brandon Cooks. So I still think even if you run it back this year and give him another chance, you'll still, if it really doesn't work out, you can go back next offseason and still get a decent return for him. So I think why rush? Why not give Baker a chance with all these weapons? This Browns team is equipped to really have a nice offense. I think Stefanski is the right guy to run the offense, to be the head coach. So I say keep him.
I agree. I think that's very valid. I think you need one more year. I think 1 year is too small of a sample size. Baker's still young, was really careless with the ball. So I think one more year, let him give it one more try. But if it fails again this year, Odell's on out. And even if they start the year 2-6, 3-5, I think he's a candidate to be moved at the deadline.
Yeah, that'll be a really interesting story to monitor if it comes to that. So Jake, you're one who's a very fun guy. You love some games, and we're gonna play our new game on Charlie and Jake's Hot Takes, the over/under game. The Caesars Sportsbook placed their over/under win totals for each NFL team for the 2020 season. And the first one that we're going to look at is the Packers, who were placed at 8.5 wins. Let's hear about this, Jake.
I think that's terrible. If I were a betting man, then I would definitely go throw everything I have on the over with the Packers. Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, a good offensive line, good edge rushers. I think this is a really good team, a top 3 or 4 team in the NFC that's poised to make another run at the Super Bowl. I think 8.5 is just crazy. It is a very tough division with 3 talented teams around him.
That's a deep division. But I have to agree with you here. It's one of those things where I have trouble because – first of all, they put the Bears at 8.5, and they put the Vikings at 9. I don't think the Vikings are a better football team.
Yeah, I thought that was crazy.
The Vikings lost Stephon Diggs. They lost other pieces. I don't know if I believe in them. And then the Bears, you really don't know what you're getting. I mean, granted, obviously the wins have to go somewhere. They have to add up mathematically, and they gave the Lions a 6.5. So that has a part in it that everybody's kind of clustered within that 6.5 to 9 range in that division, which is kind of just indicating that the division's kind of wide open, which I would agree with. But regardless, I mean, you look at this Packers team, they didn't lose much. I mean, coming from the fact that one thing you could say is on the outside they're thin, which is fair. Davante Adams is really their only guy at receiver right now who's proven himself. And then you have like a bunch of guys. You have Alan Lazard, who's out of Iowa State, who showed some signs. Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Jerome.
I like him a lot.
They've both shown flashes, but neither of them have really proved to be a number 2.
Yeah, consistently.
Then they brought in Devin Funchess from Green Bay, from Indianapolis. He didn't.
That's an interesting. I think that's an interesting sign. He was really good in Carolina, so if he could get back to that level, that's a really solid number 2 wide receiver.
I mean, yeah, I think Devin Funchess. Obviously, you don't know how missing a year will affect him, but I think he's better than the 3 guys, than Lazard, Valdez, Scantling, or Allison. And then you combine that with Aaron Rodgers, who's still playing great ball. That could be a really dynamic combination.
I agree, and I just think that it's a good team. And I think as long as number 12 still in the green and yellow, it's their division to lose. I think that 8.5 is really just a very low number, and they got the defense great, which I think something that Rodgers hasn't had for most of his career. And people love to knock him for his success, but for his lack of success. But he really hasn't had great defenses around him. I think this is going to be the best defense he's ever had, second it to last year maybe. and
Mhm.
they could play. And I think that Green Bay's a team to watch for the Super Bowl this year. I expect to see them playing late in January.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say one thing. I'd be remiss not to mention that the Packers had incredible health last year. The only notable guy who missed anything really, besides like a game or two here or there, was Devontae Adams. He had
Yep.
an annoying
Toe
toe,
injury.
but it only cost him 4 games. He still had a great year. In the NFL, you're not going to have two incredibly healthy years in a row. History kind of suggests that people get injured. It kind of happens, and the Packers really avoided the injury bug last year. So maybe that could factor into the over under that they think some injuries might come. If this team loses Aaron Rodgers for any period of time, this is a fair mark. And you have to wonder. I mean, it's just kind of a thing that's more or less accepted throughout the NFL is that defensive production is a lot harder to predict than offensive production. And in that sense, that offensive production seems to carry over more year to year. Defensive production, this Packers defense was really good. And while I think they have some really good players, I don't know if it's as good as it was this year. I mean, towards the end of the year, I don't think they were as good. And you kind of saw that when they played a team like San Francisco who could really run the ball.
They got exposed.
They got exposed. I think San Francisco hung 37 on them in the regular season and in the NFC Championship. But,
they really need to work on that rush defense. They have some good guys who could get to the quarterback, the Alexanders, but I think they really need to work on stopping the run, especially with San Francisco being the top team in that conference that wants to ground and pound the ball. So if you want to get to the Super Bowl, it goes through San Francisco.
And also they lost Blake Martinez, who, while he was a bad coverage tight end, he was their stop-the-run guy. He had 155 tackles last year.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of the defensive middle linebacker ace. So even though he might not be the most talented guy on that defense, he did a lot of small things that I think they're going to miss a lot. I think that's the type of guy who, he was probably their defensive leader, and I know a lot of Packers fans were concerned about losing him, even if it was kind of. I don't think you want to play him what the Giants paid him. I think he was a little overvalued, but it's definitely a tough loss. They lost Jimmy Graham at tight end. I mean, he wasn't great for them, but he was a reliable.
He was a reliable target.
So I think they'll look at a guy like Cole Kmet from Notre Dame. This year's tight end class is like very thin. Wide receivers are a lot, but the tight ends are really few and far between, and guys that you'd really be comfortable drafting. So we'll see there. Maybe they go later for a guy like Thaddeus Moss. But it'll really be interesting to me if this team hits a little – it was almost like a honeymoon year with Matt LaFleur. Everything seemed to go right. The free agent additions worked out well. Aaron Rodgers seemed happy. Everything seemed to work. Aaron Jones was amazing. Just to throw out some stats of that running back duo. So you had Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. They combined for more than 1,500 yards rushing, 17 rushing touchdowns, 88 catches, almost 800 yards receiving, and 8 touchdowns receiving. So that's 25 touchdowns and over 2,000 all-purpose yards from your running back duo. But that's another thing. Is that going to happen again? Do you think you get all that from both of them? While there are places where they can improve, I see a lot more places for regression. So maybe this team isn't 13-3 again. Maybe they're more 11-5, 10-6 range. But I don't think they're 8-8.
Well, one thing I want to talk about, though, is you said injuries, though. I think they're not a team that's loaded with star power. So I think if Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams stay healthy, there's not really any other injuries, one guy that's going to destroy the team. Obviously, if 3 or 4 starters go down there in trouble. But as long as 12 and 17 stay healthy, I think that they're a legitimate candidate to be playing late in January.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, like we said, you don't have one good edge rusher. You have Za'Darius and Preston Smith, who both had over 12 sacks. Then you have that DB group, which is those guys are really unheralded, but they can play. You have Jair Alexander, Kevin King, Darnell Savage. These are guys who are going to be appearing in Pro Bowls and All-Pro teams for the next 10 years, I think. I think really highly of the defensive backfield that they have. So I think the 8.5 is really low. I think any team that has Aaron Rodgers, I mean, granted, they did have some rough years in the last 2 years of Mike McCarthy, but I think this team, the front office did a really good job retooling. And if they have I think if they can get some more weapons offensively on the draft, I think they'll be in a good position.
Mm-hmm.
So we go from that. Now we go back to our coverage of the draft, and it's back to Tua. You know, we've talked Tua a bunch. We talked to him on our first episode, and we have to talk to him again because everything kind of seemed rosy at that time in terms of Tua. It seemed like he was skyrocketing up draft boards. It seemed like he was going to be the second quarterback, pretty consensus. And then as the draft got closer, it seemed like doubt has kind of creeped back into people's mind, or at least the doubt might have always been there, but it's become a lot more public in the last week or two. So, Jake, let me know what you think about Tua.
So I think he shows signs. He really can throw the ball. Like Trent Dilfer said, he's the best prospect he's ever seen. So I think that he really shows signs, but he's a little guy. He's injury prone. So do you really want to risk a top 5 pick on him? I don't know, because he hasn't played a full season healthy. As I said, he's a little guy. So there's a lot of question marks surrounding him, and you don't really want a lot of question marks surrounding your franchise quarterback. There's not so many question marks with Burrow and Herbert, and is Tua going to get picked up with those guys who have nothing really seeming wrong with them?
And, it's really a big risk versus reward thing, because if you're an NFL GM, you're sitting in the war room and you're thinking, if I draft Tua, it could either get me a huge contract extension if it ends up working out, or it could end up in being the pick that gets me fired because he never suits up for the NFL, or when he does, he's just automatically injured. And for me, it's so hard because I watch Tua and I just see a guy who's so dynamic. He's really can throw the ball. He has the arm to make all the throws. He's mobile. He does. If there were no injury concerns, I'll be on the record saying I think he's the best quarterback in this class. I like him a lot, but the injury concerns, he's had 4 surgeries.
Yeah.
Both calves worked on. He's had a knee. He messed up his
ankle.
His ankles, not calves. But it's a scary thing. But I think at the end of the day, if you think that if you're confident in the player that Tua is, I think you still take him. And I think you disagree with that, Jake.
Well, I think it's so hard for anyone to really evaluate him. And with the whole draft process being changed this year due to the coronavirus, I think it's really hard because when we look at him, when he's healthy, I agree with you. He is number one, probably above Burrow. He really throws the ball well. But we don't really know now how he's going to be. That's a serious injury that he took, the same one that ended Bo Jackson's career. Mm-hmm. So we don't know. We're not going to know about him until September or October. So it's really hard to evaluate him. And that's why it's a really tough job for general managers. Do they want to take that risk?
Yeah, it's one of those things that this is a different situation if we're not experiencing a pandemic, because teams haven't been able to bring them into their facilities and have them checked out by their doctors. They're relying on the stuff from the Alabama doctors, and they're relying on the MRIs that they've gotten and all the physical exams and stuff. But it's hard because do you trust that? It's a hard thing to trust. That's why I'm saying this draft, Tua, I feel like it's kind of a perfect storm that it didn't work out for him being in this draft. It's looking like, obviously, the injury concerns. He got injured towards the end of the season. Then you have the coronavirus, which makes it unable for teams to check him out, which obviously lowers his draft stock. And it's hard. And just like to throw out some quotes, and Mel Kiper Jr., obviously ESPN's draft expert, he said that people in the league are saying he could fall, and everybody's doing their due diligence, including the Patriots, which I think is a fascinating fit.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get Bill Belichick to work with him, that staff, like we were talking about earlier with Jordan Love, they could really do some magic. But no matter where he goes, the health scares are going to be there. He's going to need to learn how to play quarterback a little bit differently. He took too many chances at Alabama, I think. I think he let himself get hit. But I think that's a thing you can teach. You can teach a guy how to slide. You can tell him you need to be a little bit less ambitious because it will end up costing you a career. And he might do some things, but I think that he has enough of a skill set. I'm confident enough in Tua Tagovailoa as a player that I'm willing to risk the injury.
So if you're a GM in the top 5 and Burrow's off the board, you're picking him above Herbert. You're picking him. You're confident with him in the top 5.
I'll stick with what I said when we had our Herbert versus Tua debate. I'm going with Tua. I think this guy, the concerns are there, but he can be the next guy in the NFL. He's got it. I just feel it with him. he really does a lot on the field that nobody else in this draft class can say they do.
He could be a fun quarterback to watch if he is healthy, like Mahomes is and like Lamar Jackson. He really is flashy. He can really sling the ball around the yard. So I really hope he does stay healthy because I'll be excited to watch him.
It'll definitely be the story, honestly, throughout the post draft. After whatever team picks him, I think that people will be so closely monitoring what's happening with him, how he's progressing, when he'll be ready to play. He's not going to play right away. I think that's a bad position to put him in. You need to let him heal a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get a fully healed Tua, I think he's one of those guys. Like you said with last episode when we were talking about the Giants pick and how you want to pick an exciting guy, you get a Tua.
Yeah.
That's the guy that really excites the fan base. I remember in the beginning of the season, a lot of teams that were not having great seasons were hashtag tanking for Tua. So if you don't want to tank for Trevor, Tua is a great option.
Yeah, I think that the fit's pretty obvious. I think Miami at 5, it's where it's going to be. They've loved him for a long time. They were hashtag tanking for Tua. Thought they were going to get him number 1, and I guess they fell to 5, and Tua might fall to 5. So I think that's really the perfect fit. He could play behind Fitzpatrick for a year or a couple weeks and see how it works. I think that's where we're going to see him.
So now I'm moving on to some NBA. First, it would be interesting for us to talk about just for a bit. The MJ documentary is going to come out tonight. The first 1 and 2, right?
1 and 2, yeah. 9 and 10 on ESPN.
Yeah, and I'm super excited. What are some things that you're excited to see from that? I mean, obviously we all know Michael Jordan is. Some say he's the GOAT, some say he's the second best, but that's pretty widely considered that he's up there. So what are you excited about?
I'm really kind of intrigued because we didn't get to see him play. We're too young for that. So I'm really kind of see the man, the legend around Michael Jordan. I heard there's some great stories about him on and off the court. So I really would think that we're going to be able to get a good look into Michael Jordan, his career, so we can make a real GOAT evaluation, because I think it's tough when we've only seen LeBron's greatness. Obviously, we're going to say we love LeBron, but now we have to see how he matched up with Jordan. I'm really excited to see that. What about you? What are you excited for?
Well, I'm really excited because I know MJ was talking about how he thinks people are going to hate him after this a little bit. And, I'm so excited to see – I mean, we all know MJ is such a competitive guy. I'm so excited to see the lengths that he went to win. His interactions with his teammates is something that I'm really interested in. And I just think it's going to be great because, like you said, we didn't live through those 90s Bulls. We've lived in the dynasty of the Warriors. I'm also interested to kind of compare those dynasties.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to compare, like we say, the competition level, what the players say about who they were playing. I think this will definitely spark so much GOAT debate. It'll be awesome to see that on social media after the episodes. People will definitely be harping on things they loved and didn't like about MJ. So it'll be really interesting. And also, there was a report that came out that MJ, they had this footage for a while, and MJ only decided to release it after Game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals, which obviously was the game where LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers completed that 3-1 comeback for the first time in NBA history.
So I think that shows how competitive he is. He cares about being the GOAT. So I got a quick little story before we move on. Back when they used to travel, Michael Jordan always said he was the best and he was the greatest. So he said that because I'm the best player, my bags are going to come out first. I bet you guys all $20 that my bags are going to come out first of the baggage claim. So they made the bet, but little did they know that he went to the guys in the airport who did baggage claim and gave him $10 if they put his bags out first. And then, of course, it came and his bags came out first. He wanted to win. He wanted everyone to know how great he was. He was a fierce competitor and maybe competed in a little bit of a gray area. So I think we're really going to learn a lot about him tonight and the next couple of weeks.
It's certainly not like he needed the $20 from his teammates. He just wanted to win. That's why
he wanted to win.
So excited to see that. So not to disappoint you too much, Jake, but I bet you've already realized it. Yesterday would have been the start of the NBA playoffs.
My favorite time of year.
Us all. Obviously, such a fun, competitive atmosphere at the playoffs. So right now is it would have been the playoff matchups as they stand, because We don't know how the rest of the regular season would have played out, obviously. But as of now, it would have been in the West, it would have been Lakers versus Grizzlies as the 1-8. It would have been Clippers versus Magic as the 2 and Mavericks, not Magic, as the 2 and the 7. It would have been the Rockets and the Nuggets. The Rockets at 6 and the Nuggets at 3, and then the Jazz and the Thunder would have been 4 and 5. And then on the eastern side of the bracket, it would have been You want to tell us those matchups, Jake?
Yeah, so on the East, we would have got Milwaukee and Orlando at the 1 and the 8. Correct?
Yeah.
Milwaukee and Orlando 1 and 8. Then Toronto and the Nets 2 and 7.
Mm-hmm.
Then we got Boston and Philly at 3 and 6. And then in the middle, we got Indiana and Miami.
So for this one, we want to just both pick a series that we like in the first round. I mean, some of these we have both have pretty strong feelings that are going to win. But one that's really interesting to me is the Boston Philly series, because two teams with a lot of talent, but different strengths that I think would culminate in a really entertaining series. So, Jake, who do you take in Boston Philly series?
So one thing before we get into it, I think this is interesting because I think this is the second and third best teams in the East, and it really is almost a shame that they have to meet in the first round. But that's how it works. Sometimes Philly kind of struggled a little bit throughout the regular season. So that's how it is. And I'm a Boston guy. I'm going to take Boston. I think they out-talent them. I think it's huge that they're going to have home court advantage. And Philly struggled so much on the road. I don't see them coming into Boston and winning one.
Yeah, I mean, the road struggles are crazy. I mean, you look at the teams that Philly's lost to on the road, and it really makes you question what's up with that, what's up with Brett Brown. But then you look at them at home, they're 29-2. So it would be one of those situations where you think it might be 4-3. Boston wins all 4 at home. Yeah. Philly wins all 3 at home. But I have to put my faith in the Philadelphia 76ers. They haven't been great. They've been bad this year. They've been a team that's underachieved. But I think this was the series that one would have been good because they would have gotten to match up against a team that I think they match up against very well. And I think the size is going to overwhelm the Celtics. Who are you going to put on Joel Embiid? Who's stopping Ben Simmons in transition? I don't know if Boston can go. Boston can score with them, but I don't think they can stop Philly.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I agree. But I think that Boston's a deep team. I think Boston has that 5 of Hayward, Smart, Tatum, Walker, and Brown. And although they don't match up well, they have 5 scorers on the court, which is very rare. While Philly just doesn't have scorers like that. Ben Simmons can't score in the half court. So Embiid's their really only dominant scorer, and I guess Tobias Harris could get you some buckets. But Al Horford's old. So I think that other than Simmons and Embiid, they don't have that many dogs like Boston does.
Well, I kind of, just to rewind on what I was saying earlier, I think I tripped up a little bit because what I should say is I think that Boston might be able to defend them a little bit, but it's hard to score on this Philadelphia 76ers team. They're huge. And, Kemba Walker's great. I like him, but he's going to get suffocated. I like Jason Tatum, but I don't know if he's going to be able to be the backbone throughout a 7-game series. And you look at Philly, I think that they have enough on the offensive side. I think Tobias gives you enough. I think that he can be the secondary scorer of Embiid. Embiid, I think he's hungry after the last playoffs. We have to remember, this team was one Kawhi bounce away from getting overtime in Game 7 and possibly going into the Eastern Conference Finals. So, or not Eastern Conference Finals, the Finals, right?
That's with Jimmy Butler, though. Jimmy Butler is the leader on that team. They're definitely a worse team than they were last year.
No, I agree. But I'm just saying I think that those feelings still sit, and I think if you put this team in a playoff atmosphere, there's not that much that can stop them. I mean, you also have to understand, listen, I know they're not incredibly deep, but they still have some guys. I don't know if you remember prior to the suspension of the NBA season, Shake Milton was really trying to become their guy off the bench. He was even starting some games for them in lieu of some injuries. He can be a guy off the bench. I trust him to get some buckets. Then they picked up Alec Burks on the market, who's really severely underrated. He can get you 15 or 17 points off the bench, and I think he would be a big player for this team. Josh Richardson has kind of disappointed me since being traded to Philly. I like him a lot. But I think his 3-and-D is he's the type of guy who I think will come out in the playoffs because those 3-and-D guys, it just seems like in the playoffs they kind of get a lot more when the stars are kind of going at it. It's always nice to have a good 3-and-D guy dish it and swish it. And I think that this Philly team, while there are some obvious issues, I think their talent is just much better than Boston.
Well, I think there's two things, and I don't disagree with you what you're saying, but I think there's two things that gives Boston the advantage. The one main one is which they lost with Jimmy Butler is leadership. I think to win a 7-game playoff series, especially when you're going to have to win a couple on the road, you need a good leader. And I don't think they have that. I think they kind of fall apart at the seams when they're losing, and they don't have like a strong bond like Boston has. So I think that it's really tough to win on the road, especially in a place like Boston when you don't have great leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And also I think that if we're going to talk about Jason Tatum, I don't think they have the forwards to guard Jason Tatum. Embiid can't guard Tatum. I mean, maybe you could put Simmons on him, but Simmons is a guard, and I think Tatum could get to the bucket on Al Horford or Tobias Harris. So who do they really have that can shut down Jason Tatum the way he's been playing?
I think Tatum will burn him a little bit. I think he's going to go off. But Kemba Walker hasn't played in the playoffs since, I think, 2015, 2016. It's been a while for him since the playoffs. Yeah. So he's really the leader of that team who doesn't have playoff experience. Then you have a guy like Al Horford who has a lot of playoff experience. While he hasn't had a good year, he's another one of those guys. Playoff games and series are won in the trenches. And he's an in-the-trenches type of player. He's going to play some great defense.
But is he still that guy?
I think he's still that guy. He hasn't gone from not being that guy in one year. I think the fit was questionable. I think the issue is more with the fit than an Al Horford as a player. But I think this team is more suited for the playoffs than the regular season because the regular season, like you said, you play so many games, you kind of lose that defensive mentality, I think. In the regular season, it's easy to lose that. But in the playoffs, when every bucket matters, there's just a certain ringing up for both teams. And I think when that happens, when Philadelphia really gets into their defensive sets and they have all those guys, I don't know if Boston can score with them in 7 games.
Well, here's what I'm thinking, though, and I think this is the problem with Philly, not just in this series. They have a ceiling on them. I just don't think Simmons and Embiid work well together. Simmons is a guy like LeBron who wants to take to the rim, and having a back-to-the-basket guy like Embiid, it just doesn't work. Their play styles are too different, and I think that's going to come to the fruition with a great coach like Brad Stevens, and he's going to pick that apart, their weaknesses apart.
Yeah. I mean, I do think there's a questionable fit. I don't think they'll make the finals, but I do think they'll make it past the first round based on talent alone. I think there's going to be you're going to see a couple of games where Joel Embiid is going to score 40 points. He's going to get his money's worth. He's going to get fouled a lot. He's going to get Boston into foul trouble because there aren't many guys in this league who can guard Joel Embiid, and there certainly aren't guys on the Boston Celtics who can do that.
But they also all have to stay healthy, though. They've had a lot of injury concerns with Embiid and Simmons, so they also have to stay healthy through a physical 7-game series, which that will be. So can they do that is another question mark. Yeah. I think Philly really has the potential to compete with anybody in the NBA, the Bucks, Lakers, the Clippers, when everything's working. But I think if one little thing comes out of place, I just don't know what type of team they are.
That's fair, but I just think Boston's gritty team effort play style – I think is great to rack up wins in the regular season. They're a disciplined team. I like how they play. And Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have really impressed me this year. But I think when the push comes to shove and you really need to get some buckets in the postseason, I think that I'd trust Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid over Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in terms of getting stops, getting scores. I think Philly will be able to get out and transition enough to get the series win.
Well, I don't think we should forget, though, about the last gritty Boston team that went to the playoffs a couple of years ago when they were up 12 points in Game 7 away from the NBA Finals with a younger Jason Tatum, a younger Jaylen Brown, no star like Kevin Walker, and they were Kemba Walker, and they were very, very close to the finals with that great play style. They ran through Philly. They beat a young Milwaukee team, and they really have LeBron on the ropes.
Yeah, that's fair. But, I mean, the reason that series was the way it was because as great as LeBron is, and he was the only reason they won that series, who else that Cavs team was bad besides LeBron?
They also beat Philly. They beat Philly 4-1. I know that was a very, very, very different Philly team, but they ran right through Philly, and this is a very different Boston team too.
Mm-hmm. I think Philly is in a situation where this is make it or break it time for this core. And I think that some teams will bend at adversity. And I trust this Philly team like few do. I think a lot of people are ready to throw in the towel on them, but I think that they can grind out this series, and then who knows when they play Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I think let's go on. What's one matchup you like in the West?
Well, I think Nuggets Rockets is just so interesting because you have two basically completely different teams. You have the Rockets who love their ISO ball, love getting Russell Westbrook and James Harden buckets, and then you have the Nuggets who are team oriented. They have a lot of guys who could do it in different ways, and I'm interested, really excited to see that series.
So I think that Houston is going to come out on top of that series because I think small ball will kill the Nuggets. Every time I watch Houston, they do a really good job at taking the opposing team center out of the game with transition, unless you got an athletic guy, which I don't think Jokic is athletic enough to play small ball and get up and down the court. So they're going to be able to take Denver's best player out of the game, and then I don't know how great they are without Jokic, especially with him on the bench.
But, okay, that's fair. He's going to have a little trouble on defense. Although Jokic this year has improved so much defensively, and people don't want to realize it. They think just because he's a big guy who's kind of funny when he moves a little bit, people are automatically quick to judge him as a bad defender. But he's really improved against the pick and roll. He's done a lot to improve his defense. Obviously, he's going to have some trouble in transition, but all the trouble he has in transition is PJ Tucker going to – I like PJ Tucker, but he can't guard Nikola Jokic.
I agree with you fully.
Nikola Jokic will go back to the basket, hook shots, flashy passes to Jamal Murray and Gary Harris. Jokic will feast if they play.
I agree with you. I think it's going to be an offensive series. I think Jokic is going to be such a liability, though, on defense. Can you really keep him in the game, though, for his offensive prowess? And if you could throw him some doubles, though, how good can he do? Robert Covington and PJ Tucker maybe could rough him up down there. And then he's really going to be a problem on defense, which I think the advantage shifts to Houston.
But I like the other guys on Denver. Jamal Murray has really improved throughout his career. I still think he's still a jump away from really being in that top echelon of point guards, but he can make shots. He's a dynamic player. Gary Harris has had a rough year, but he's another guy who can really turn it on for them. They've got guys on the bench. I like Monte Morris a lot. It's one of those things that they're just very deep in Denver. They really have a good team, and I think that it's a good enough to win a first round in the series. And it's even that I love Denver, I also don't like Houston. We've seen this over and over again because I see two guys who don't do well in the playoffs, and putting them together, it's not going to do it.
We don't know, though. We don't know. And I just think down the stretch, it helps to have the two best scorers, right? Because it's going to be a close series. We can both agree it's going to be high scoring. It's going to be competitive. Down the stretch, when you need a bucket late, the two best players are going to be on Houston's team.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd argue that I like Jokic more than some of those guys on Houston. I don't know if I don't trust Russell Westbrook in the clutch because he's done nothing to prove to me that he's a guy who's going to get you a bucket because he can't shoot. Late in
but he stopped shooting. But he became a much more efficient player, though, this year.
He's been more efficient, yes, but they're going to sag off him at the end of games. They're going to double Harden, but they're going to give him.
He could hit an open three, though. He's not a great shooter, but if you give him an open three,
he's shooting bad from three, Jake. He's really not. I don't trust him to hit an open three. I don't trust Russell Westbrook, and I know that James Harden is continually kind of folded in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. But I think that this is their year. They got the guys, and Eric Gordon's a great shooter if you leave him open. So what? You're going to bring the double to Harden. He's got guys who could kick it out. Robert Covington could hit a three. PJ Tucker could hit a three. They got five guys who could really score the ball from all three levels.
Yeah, and James Harden isn't taking that shot. If you think James Harden and Russell Westbrook aren't the ones taking those big shots, that's what's going to happen. It's what has to happen. They didn't trade Chris Paul, who's a better fit on this team than Russell Westbrook, even though people won't like to admit it, to not give one of those two guys the big plays in the at the end of the game. James Harden's going to be it probably won't even be that much with Westbrook. In the end of games, will be James Harden doing his thing. And I think that's great. And I like James Harden, but I don't trust him in the playoffs. And
But he wants to win. He wants to win. He's had enough losing. He's had enough with getting criticized by the media. So if passing the ball a little bit to Westbrook and Gordon and the other guys on the team will get him to the next round and get him over the hump and maybe get him to the NBA Finals or the Conference Finals, he's willing to do that. He's willing to make sacrifices. He wants to win.
It's great to say he's willing to do that, but I don't believe that he is. I don't think he will. I don't think he's going to go to the next best guy. I think James Harden will win this series because of James Harden, and I don't think James Harden is going to win this series. I think the Nuggets' depth, I think they're scoring. They're going to have trouble defending, but I think they'll score as well with their team, and I think it's just going to be one of those series where you see that to me, this series is a lot like the Utah Thunder series of 2 years ago, where Utah had Oklahoma City had the star power this year with the big three, Paul George, Melo, and Russ. And, first of all, that is one of the reasons I don't trust Russ in the playoffs. I mean, the last
that was bad.
He struggled. I remember the elimination game, he put up like 40-something shots. He scored 40-something, but it was probably the most inefficient.
But he's a different player now, though. You can look at the numbers. He's a different player.
He's defaulting more to James Harden now, which is good. But I just don't think their playing style. I don't like iso ball in the playoffs in general. They play too much isolation for me to trust them in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that it's tough that Houston has to go on the road. They're going to have to steal one in Denver. But I just think that Harden, this is the year with the superpower that they could get over the hump, not the lump. I think Jokic is going to be such a liability on defense. He's not going to be able to play the minutes that he wants to play. He's going to get tired pushing the ball, and I think that's when they'll be able to capitalize.
But I think you're underestimating Jokic. He's made so many strides as a defender. They might catch him in transition a couple of times, but Denver also has a really good defensive team outside of Jokic. They've held defense.
No, I think Jokic is a great defender, and I think if you put him against any other team, he's almost an elite defender. Not there yet, but getting there. But I just think the speed that they have, he's not a fast guy. You can't make the argument he's a fast guy. He can defend centers very well, but you can't make the argument that he's a speedy guy.
No. But I think that they have the defensive players. They have a guy like Paul Millsap, who's a Grizzly veteran. To me, he's a lot like an Al Horford in that he's been there, he's done that, he can play.
He's an older guy.
And I think they have enough. Gary Harris is one of the most underrated defenders in the league for me. And I just think they have enough defense where if you have enough good defenders, you can hide your worst defenders. That's a big thing in the NBA because obviously not everybody's a defender.
But Jamal Murray's not a great defender, though. I think he could struggle on Harden or Westbrook. So we'll really see. I think it'll be definitely very interesting.
It will be a great series. I would see that game going to 6 or 7 at least. And when Denver wins, I will tell you so. And I know if the Rockets win, I'll hear it from you.
Yeah,
and same thing with the other series. But that's it for us today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week.